An unfathomable world. A world we know exists, but nobody wants to get to know.
The men incarcerated here are extremely dangerous.
Those are chopping up heads and everything.
Total anarchy.
Another inmate attacked me. He stabbed my eye.
The more corrupt, the better for me.
Behind bars is a struggle just to survive.
I don't hurt anybody else. I just hurt myself.
And only the strongest will survive.
I keep on fighting to get out of here for them.
Their lives are always in somebody else's hands.
Pretty much caged animals. They'll lock you up and throw away the key.
Behind bars. In the toughest prisons in the world. Tijuana, Mexico, just over the US border. Every day, thousands of people make their way over to the other side. Amongst them, illegal immigrants, hard-partying tourists from the US, and traffickers. This strip of border is under close surveillance. Weapons go to Mexico, drugs to the US. A battle that rages on with no end in sight, regardless of how tall the fence is. Thousands of people have already paid with their lives. All these factors make Tijuana one of the most extreme cities in the world. Poverty, slums, and drug abuse on one side. And on the other, Mexico's biggest den of prostitution and excess. It's a place where the parties get wilder and wilder and never seem to stop. And yet, anyone who commits a crime in Tijuana will soon find themselves here. La Mesa, a prison that strikes more than fear into Mexicans.
Everything's dirty. Just sitting on the toilet is horrendous.
And one where Americans feel like scum.
I'm a United States Marine. Over there, I'm a hero. Over here, I'm a villain.
A self-contained empire governed by one man who rules with an iron fist.
I am very proud. This prison used to be notorious.
A jail that houses cold-blooded killers.
I killed multiple police officers, including a high-ranking commander. It was obvious that they would have it in for me.
Fighting back leads to harsh punishments.
They just leave us to rot away in here and lock the doors.
The inmates, known for having short fuses. La Mesa's history is peppered with riots and rebellions, and a high death toll. The next rebellion is a constant threat. Keeping things under control is a potentially deadly battle in one of the toughest prisons in the world. "6:30 in the morning. A new shift is about to start at one of Mexico's most notorious prisons, located in the heart of downtown Tijuana. Commanding Officer Mario Antonio Mesa Flores arrives. He's responsible for security inside the jail, and he's constantly in danger. Apart from the Mexican police and justice, Tijuana is governed by one thing above anything else: drug cartels. Attract their attention, and you won't be around for long. The morning security routine. Regardless of whether you're a guard or the commander-in-chief, everyone has to undergo the checks. Metal detector, security scan, and a physical search. There's no getting out of it. Drugs, weapons, and even cigarettes are all banned from La Mesa. At 7, the guards start to get ready for duty. Their job? To keep the 3,000 or so inmates under control. This involves patrolling the prison and raiding cells. Block by block, the commander's troops tear the cells apart in a never-ending cycle.
We're mainly looking for weapons and substances like drugs and tobacco.
First things first, the morning briefing. The guards are equipped with handcuffs, batons, and tear gas.
Ramírez. Medina Curiel. Presenta, señor. Medina Valenzuela. Presenta, señor. Torres Esparza. Presente. Tapia Cano. Presente. Dale vuelta. Ya.
Their destination, the cell blocks. La Mesa separates its prisoners according to crime, risk profile, age, and gender. Building 1 is home to drug traffickers, thieves, and those convicted of violent crimes. In Section 2, there are kidnappers and murderers with a low-risk profile. 3 and 4 house small-scale criminals, prison workers, and the elderly. Locked away in Section 5, sex offenders and the sick, ranging from diabetes to HIV. They all share a central area. Block number 6 is completely cut off from the rest of the prison. This wing is home to the toughest of all the inmates, cartel killers and serial murderers. And then there's a whole separate block for women. Commander Flores starts his inspection in block number 1. Every day, up to 20 new prisoners wind up here. Flores' goal is to determine what the mood is like here. Are the inmates acting up to the moment? Are there any gangs forming inside the cells? And where should he start the next raid? For committing crimes like theft, mugging, possession of a weapon, and drug trafficking, each cell in Block 1 at La Mesa holds an average of 8 to 10 criminals. They share an area of just 4 by 4.5 meters. Inmates have few belongings, mainly a few pieces of clothing, towels, and small souvenirs from the world outside, all stripped back to the bare essentials. One of the inmates, Abraham Chavez Orozco. At the age of 22, he is one of the youngest in La Mesa. Arrested at the airport for drug trafficking, he was sentenced to 5 years. He's already done 3. That means 3 years of sleeping, showering, going to the toilet, without a single ounce of privacy.
Everything is dirty. Just sitting on the toilet is horrendous. I've had a foot infection in the past. The food is bad and unhygienic. And it's freaking hot.
Abraham's family have long been trying to get him relocated to another prison, though to no avail so far. But he's still hopeful. Many other inmates have lost all sense of hope, particularly the prison's American residents, such as Taylor Elliott Howard. After all, U.S. citizens have to remember that getting in trouble with the law in Tijuana, just a stone's throw from home, will land them here. Taylor shares his cell with 6 other Americans. They're kept separate. The risk of altercations with other inmates is too high.
I was being accused of stealing a car, armed robbery of a car. So he said I had 2 guns, a AR-15 and a 9mm. So he gave me 9 years for that.
9 years in La Mesa, penned up in one of the toughest prisons in the world.
This is my bed, this is where I sleep, right here. This is where Sean sleeps. This is Troy right here. Over here on the top, we got Brandon, we got Dakota, we got Ty, and Mike sleeps right here. We go over into the bathroom, right here. The sink where we wash our hands. The toilet over here. Right now, as you can see, the water is off. It comes on only for like a few hours a day.
The misuse here is terrible. The living conditions here is terrible. I'm a combat veteran. I'm a United States Marine. I've served in the Iraqi War. I'm decorated. Over there, I'm a hero. Over here, I'm a villain. I can't even make a phone call to my family to let them know where I'm at.
But the worst thing isn't the cell itself. Even worse is the fact that the inmates are almost never allowed out.
We only get 2 hours of sun a week. If that, sometimes they cut it short. Or sometimes somebody would do something stupid on the yard and get the yard messed up for the rest of us. So we'll get like half an hour or an hour if somebody messes up. Other than that, we're stuck in here 24 hours a day, 6 days a week.
In La Mesa, exercise and fresh air are a luxury. Regardless of whether you're a car thief, drug dealer, child abuser, or cartel killer, the only glimpse any of them get of the sun tends to be through bars. They spend almost their entire sentence in their cells. This means 2 square meters for each inmate, some for just a few years, others for the rest of their lives. No doubt about it. Locked away on an almost permanent basis without any privacy, in a prison with an ironclad set of rules, rules laid out by one man. He has had the first and last word on what goes on at La Mesa since 2014. Director Cesar Daniel Ramirez Acevedo.
Mr. Director, sir, I'm reporting for duty. There are just a few small abnormalities. Everything is in order.
Okay, that's good to know.
Every day, Acevedo checks whether his prison is still under control and tries to isolate problem cases as early as possible. Before La Mesa, Acevedo had already held the post of director at 5 other Mexican prisons. Now, he's in the heart of Tijuana, a city where drug cartels battle it out for total domination, and where 85% of all murders are related to narcotics. Acevedo rules with the principle of 100% control. No matter what's going on in his jail, Director Acevedo knows about it. The first inmates are allowed outside early in the morning, a moment that puts all of the wardens on high alert. After all, the chance of an attack on the guards, perhaps using a homemade weapon, is never higher than at this moment. The routine is always the same. Between Monday and Thursday, the guards open up very specific cells on a certain floor of a specific building. The same cells at the same time every week, and only one at a time. The next group cannot be released until all of the inmates are in the stairway. This is how the guards keep the upper hand. For most inmates, the precise moment offers them the only 2 hours of direct sunlight they get each week. The prisoners are separated over 3 different courtyards. Thanks to all these measures, inmates can only ever come into contact with just a few dozen others during their time in prison, regardless of how long they may have been in there. This is how La Mesa's director, Acevedo, keeps the risk of illegal trading, fights, and weapon or drug dealing to a minimum.
Nowadays, we have a huge number of rules to increase security. They enable us to keep perfect control. These rules didn't exist in the past. We had a lot more yard time, but without the proper supervision. Back then, a different government was ruling Mexico, and we had a lot more problems with gang warfare.
At La Mesa, the guards have lost their fight against the inmates on more than one occasion, with fatal consequences. It happened in 2008. 2 riots occurred within the space of 1 month. The first riot saw 4 inmates lose their lives. To punish the prisoners, water and food were rationed. This then led to a second rebellion and days of fighting. prisoners' families started to get desperate. Eventually, the police stormed the prison, and the outcome? 12 severely injured and 21 dead. A catastrophe, one that should never happen again. These days, the external security team at La Mesa makes sure even if another riot does occur, nobody manages to escape. Guards protect the outer wall in the center of a Mexican city that is home to millions. An additional safety measure? Highly trained attack dogs in no man's land. Should worse come to worse, the guards are equipped with both firearms and grenades. What's more, La Mesa places its most dangerous inmates in strict isolation, in their own separate block. Commander Flores continues his hunt for rioters in Section 6. This part of the prison operates on a more or less standalone basis. About 450 prisoners are housed in this section alone. The difference? They are all ringleaders, and they work in organized cartel structures. Their risk potential, extremely high.
How's it going? Everything okay?
Yes, all good so far.
Francisco Javier Villapadilla, one of the most notorious cartel killers around, sentenced for killing a police officer. Other cases will follow.
Because of my crimes, the military tortured me to begin with. They hit me, kicked me, held my head underwater, put a plastic bag over my head. They did it all. I killed multiple police officers, including a high-ranking commander. It was obvious that they would have it in for me.
In May 2011, Francisco not only killed several police officers, he also hung their bodies from a bridge. A pretty brutal way of asserting your power. Back then, Francisco was working as a hitman for the Sinaloa cartel, infamous for its drug dealing, money laundering, and human trafficking. It is regarded as the most powerful cartel in Mexico. He was caught just a few days later, along with 3 other gang members. When he was arrested, police officers recovered 5 weapons, 174 rounds of ammunition, and 51 bags of crystal meth, among other things.
I used to have an amazing life with my family, my kids, my wife, a girlfriend, and I had plenty of money. Things were good. I didn't know what it was like to go hungry, as I could always afford to buy everything. Here in prison, you don't tend to get enough, and it's usually awful.
Catering in La Mesa is dealt with by staff and the 100 or so inmates with short sentences and a low risk profile. They are the few permitted to leave their cell for an extended period outside of yard and visiting time. This scheme even allows inmates to reduce their sentence. 2 days of work takes 1 day off their time in prison. Maximum security also applies when the food is delivered. Every day, the guards check the food and staff for smuggled goods. The prisoners prepare a good 3,000 meals, 3 times a day. They also distribute the 20 or so liters of water per cell. There is no canteen. Food is delivered straight to the cells by the prisoners themselves. This is yet another measure that keeps contact between guards and those inside the cells to an absolute minimum. The main aim is to keep them in there as long as possible.
Llegó a mi casa perdida y no podía caminar, no recordaba nada, salvo que
strictly isolated from any form of contact. This is a problem that the American inmates in Block 1 are also all too familiar with. Even if they do manage to come face to face with a guard, almost no one in the prison speaks English. They can do nothing but wait.
Pretty much what they try to do here is they'll lock you up and throw away the key. Most of us don't speak Spanish.
They don't understand any English. They don't try to have any interpreters or anything like that. So as far as us, we're in trouble. There's no help out there, really.
Almost no communication, and only the bare essentials needed to survive. However, even that isn't the American inmate's biggest fear.
Since I've been here, from the conditions or the medical conditions here, there's been 9 people on this tier who have just died from being sick and stuff like that. That's not including the whole jail, just the people on this tier, on this floor right here, from the living conditions, from getting sick and not getting medical attention.
Taylor hopes to survive his time in La Mesa unscathed, one of the world's toughest prisons. He is putting his trust mainly in God. Night falls over Tijuana. While the Mexican city begins to buzz with a mix of cartel wars, drug traffickers, and American tourists looking to party, nighttime means one thing for the prisoners in La Mesa: TV, electricity, and lights off.
Turn the lights and the TV off. Time to sleep.
The next morning, it's the weekend, visiting time. Around 500 relatives flock to the prison. Only those related by blood are permitted entry. They bring clothes, hygiene products, and money to pay in for the inmates. Like Abraham's mother, Erica, she lives a few hours away. She only manages to visit her son every few weeks or so. She knows that a visit from his family is one of the very few chances her son gets to leave his cell outside of yard time. Erica has been trying to get her son relocated for a long time, to a prison where the conditions are a little less tough, closer to his family.
I want my son to get out more yard time, more activities he can get involved in. At the moment, he's cooped up with the other inmates way too much. We're waiting for the process to get underway. It started a while back, and now we need to be patient and wait for things to move forward.
Neither of the pair know if and when her application will be approved. Until then, all they can do is keep persevering. Not long later, and visiting hours are already over. Under Director Acevedo's rules, they are restricted to just a few hours. Security comes first for him. Relatives repeatedly try to smuggle drugs, tobacco, or even just pens into the prison.
When I think about where I work, the first thing that comes to mind is that it's a huge challenge. It's definitely very challenging.
Absolute control. Tiny cells. Constant vigilance. All tools that the prison director uses to attempt one thing above all else: preventing another riot. And although the prisoners aren't allowed out of their cells, they still train every day, particularly the inmates in high-security Block 6, seemingly ready for battle. To do this, they go as far as creating a clear cell schedule. 2 inmates at a time are allowed to use the few spare square meters to keep fit, until the next time they are let out. And the prisoners here are subjected to even tougher conditions than the others. Apart from opening cell after cell, this means one thing above all else: more guards, and a physical search of every single inmate to avoid smuggled weapons, and at all costs, stabbings, gang warfare, and death. After all, inmates from the various drug cartels come into direct contact with one another in the yard. They only see each other for 2 hours a week, and yet, if they were out on the streets, there's no doubt they would be trying to kill each other. Even the guards don't enter the yard in Section 6. For the inmates, their 2 hours in the yard means mainly one thing: their only chance to contact the outside world. This wasn't always the case. Up until 2002, La Mesa was a completely different prison, one with hardly any guards, one where any inmate inside its walls could do whatever he wanted. It was known as El Pueblito, the little village, a prison town with its own rules and laws. Back then, La Mesa was ruled by the country's most notorious drug barons.
We used to have everything: shops, restaurants, etc. But there was also a huge difference between those who had money and those who didn't. I did well. I worked as a bodyguard for an important inmate. Even though I was constantly on the lookout for people breathing down my neck, I was all right.
And that is from a time that now only the oldest inmates are able to remember. Like one particular inmate in Section 7, the women's block. Dolores Sanchez has been here since 1999. Her sentence, 34 years for kidnapping.
We used to be able to just open our cells and go wherever we wanted. We were free. However, other things are better nowadays. There are no drugs, no alcohol, and no corruption anymore. So it's safer and more structured now.
These days, Dolores acts as a nurse and is permitted to issue medicines like insulin and antidepressants to those suffering in the women's block. And this gives her just that little bit more freedom than most of the other inmates. However, Dolores still remembers when she led a completely different life behind bars, one with an income, along with fast food restaurants, laundrettes, and nightclubs, but also a whole lot of drug dealing and violence. After being built in 1956, it took the government until 2002 to raze the old La Mesa to the ground. The prison was then restructured. Even now, Dolores isn't sure which of these two worlds is better and which one is tougher.
In those days, there were no rules. No one said you can't assault anyone, you can't take drugs or alcohol, you can't prostitute yourself, or anything like that. The prison management only cared about making sure no one escaped. That was it. We used to have computers, we had restaurants, we all had good money. Now, there is none of that. No cash.
These days, La Mesa at least has shops. The prison sells instant soups, snacks, and soft drinks in each of the 5 yards. They also sell really basic items, like toilet paper, things prisoners need to buy themselves, and luxury goods such as hair dye. The sales clerks are inmates, like Jose Varos Guerrero, sentenced to almost 7 years for possession of a weapon. Inmates pay using their fingerprints. Everything is completely electronic. The prison is a kind of bank. This enables it to control who owns what, and it can even freeze your account.
Then you can only buy the essentials. No cookies, for instance. Nothing special. What's sanctioned?
Always in high demand, fresh food for the more affluent inmates, prepared in the men's prison kitchen. And during delivery, an important rule applies: strict separation of the sexes. Men and women are banned from any contact in La Mesa. The workers hold full responsibility for the quality and quantity.
I'm making sure the quality is okay and checking if there's the right number of sandwiches.
Should any of the items go missing, Chise risks facing the worst punishment of them all: banishment to a place where no one in the whole of La Mesa wants to end up.
The punishment would be the isolation cell. They would cut your yard time, and you wouldn't be able to call your family anymore.
And a stay in isolation means a whole lot more than just solitary confinement in La Mesa. It's a punishment that all inmates fear. While on the hunt for the next riot, Commander Flores arrives at a place that not even the guards like to visit. One of the prison's isolation cells. Fighting, weapons, drugs. Anyone who breaks the prison's rules winds up here. And that means even less sunlight, no electricity, locked away. Inmates vegetate in isolation for days on end. The cells are dominated by sweat, stagnant air, and an ever-increasing amount of mold on the walls. Inmates here even have to go without toilet paper. They can't be sure when they'll be allowed out.
The overall situation here is just a huge problem. It's unbelievably hot. All you can do is sit or stand up for a short amount of time. We're in total isolation, without any air supply, apart from one small fan. They just leave us to rot away in here and shut the doors. The other problem is the water. There isn't running water from the tap every day. Today there is, but it's not always the case. There isn't enough to drink.
Locked away for weeks and months. All the inmates can do is vegetate here. Everyone in the isolation cell comes from Block 6, the block for cartel killers and serial murderers. And most of them are new arrivals. Director Acevedo is here to check the risk status. After all, each one of these cells is home to half a dozen alpha males or more. Rivalries and fights to become top dog can spring up at any time. And this is exactly what the criminals have been learning to deal with on the streets of Tijuana for years.
Tijuana is a city where a lot happens. It's also the city with the highest number of border crossings in the world. And because of that, there's a lot of crime and kidnapping here. All problems that we need to sort out. What goes on outside the prison is exactly the same as what goes on inside the prison. It's just a mirror for the city.
Outside, gang members fight each other. Inside, they have to live with their enemies. Just like cartel hitman Francisco. He shares a cell with members of other gangs. He has gradually learned to accept this fact, and he's not sure if he ever wants to return to his old life. Be it then or now, he has come to realize that he has spent a lot longer living an unfree life than the 7 years he has spent in La Mesa.
I used to hunt people down to kill them, so I was always in danger. Therefore, I wasn't free on the outside either. It was also like living in a kind of prison.
Francisco's biggest worry? He hasn't heard anything from his family for a long time. The only person to sometimes visit him is his mother. Francisco believes that his kids are now criminals too, though he doesn't know for sure.
I'm always thinking about my kids, my sons. I look at this photo every morning.
While all Francisco has left is his photo, Abraham in cell block 1 is hanging on to one thing above all else: hope. Finally being free. The 22-year-old is waiting for news from his mother about his upcoming move to a different, more lenient prison. The American, Taylor, lost all feeling of hope a long time ago. He hasn't spoken to his family for months. That's because inmates wanting to make a phone call need the thing you need for everything else here: money.
It sucks. It sucks. Everybody that I talk to that's here, that's been in jail in the States, say that compared to this, that America is like a hotel. The jails over there are like a hotel. We used to have, for those phones over there, they used to give us collect calls where we could call to the States for free to talk to our families. But now they got rid of the collect calls, so now you have to buy phone cards to be able to make the calls. And like me, like only one person in my cell gets money. Everybody else, we don't have family here. We don't get money, so we can't even talk to our family. And because I don't get a deposit, most of the stuff, most of the wallets and bracelets that I make and sell, I sell for hygiene stuff. Toothpaste, toothbrush, soap, stuff like that, toilet paper, because they don't supply none of that here.
Money in La Mesa is essential to survive. There's not any good news for Abraham, no updates about his release. He uses his remaining few minutes for a couple more calls with his brothers and sisters.
These calls are important to me. There are some family members and friends who I haven't seen for 3 years. Like my sisters, for example. They're growing up. That's why I talk to them, to see how things are going with them. They need to know that I'm still their brother and I'm looking out for them.
So now all the 22-year-old can do is wait another week, until the Mexican justice system decides to grant him more freedom. Or not. Taylor is enjoying the last few rays of sunshine with his friends from the U.S. and just keeps on holding out.
Nine years in this place? Bad. Really, really bad. I don't even know. I don't know how I feel. As of right now, I'm just kind of going with the flow, like, you know, another day down, a few more to go, another day down. Just going with it, you know. I'm not trying to think about it too much. You don't want to stress on the situation. Just go with it, and hopefully it gets up, you know. Just go with it.
Taylor hopes that he might still get out early for good behavior, or on early release. Free time is over after 2 hours. It's time for everyone to return to their cells. The fate awaiting most of the inmates, nearly another 7 days behind bars. To begin with, all the inmates from one cell line up behind one another. Then they leave the yard together, keeping their distance from the next group. Yard by yard. It's a method with a system behind it.
We do it so that the first group finish up their yard time first and come inside. The others have to wait. Some inmates have to be kept apart at all costs. They belong to different gangs.
From serial killer Francisco and drug trafficker Abraham to car thief Taylor. Almost all of the 3,000 inmates eventually end up behind bars again. For Commander Mario Flores, it is the perfect time to start his raid. He suspects a certain cell of having homemade weapons.
We're now going into cell 1111. One of you guys stays here. The rest will come along and keep the inmates under control.
The guards are mainly on the lookout for homemade knives, made out of toothbrushes, wires, and bits of metal. Anything the inmates could use to fight each other or attack the guards.
Get down off the beds. On the floor. Everyone on the floor. Everyone down. On the floor, over to the side.
Everyone face the wall.
On the floor, face to the wall. On the floor.
Then Commander Flores' men scour the selected cell. First, the guards lead the inmates out and subject them to a thorough search. Then the troop take apart every last centimeter of the 18 square meter cell. Mattresses, shoes, magazines, and much more.
Do you have the fan? We need to open the fan.
So far, all they have are some homemade weights. Probably harmless. But when it comes to a fight, they could be a deadly weapon. Now, time for the fan.
We found this. It's a heater. We found it inside the fan. It's homemade. Maybe it's not dangerous, but whatever. Things like this are banned in prison. We usually find this type of thing, like this thing here. The prisoners made this out of a toothbrush and a piece of metal.
The outcome of the raid? One pen, plus a small knife, and a heater for getting hot water in the cell. Both are homemade from bits of metal, a toothbrush, or some wires from an old fan. It's all reasonably harmless.
¿Conformes? Vamos. Pueden acomodar sus cosas.
The punishment for this cell's inhabitants will be decided by the prison commission over the next few days.
We're going to start to fix everything.
The prisoners are likely to only get a warning, or to have their TV or yard time taken away. In the worst-case scenario, they could also end up in isolation. Yet another day is coming to an end at La Mesa. Another day that 22-year-old convicted drug smuggler Abraham spent hoping that he will soon be out of here.
I hope to either be relocated or maybe even released sometime soon. I've noticed that people who have already been here for 3 years behave differently. They're angrier, more impatient, they're in a bad mood all the time.
And the Americans are trying not to back down, particularly Taylor.
You don't want to let this place change you. You don't want to let it, because it's a shithole. Like, you don't want to let it change you. You got to keep yourself strong, and, you know, like, you know what I mean?
Chisé, convicted for possessing of a weapon, is due to be released in a few months, and she's already planning her life.
I want to start over and have a career as a real doctor. I just want to start over and never look back.
Dolores, on the other hand, has another 15 years left behind bars. She will be in her mid-50s by the time she gets out.
When I get out of here, I need to start with coming to grips with the new technology. And people have changed too. The whole of society is different.
And hitman Francisco isn't really sure if he ever really wants to be free again.
The other people I used to work with, they were all killed within 3 months of being released. They're all dead now.
Director Acevedo has managed to keep La Mesa under control for another day. A prison in the heart of Tijuana. For a long time, a prison ruled by pure anarchy, and a prison where many people lost their lives in riots. A prison with cast iron rules, minimal freedom, and maximum surveillance.
I'm very proud. This prison used to be notorious for its chaos. It was called the Little Village, and for good reason. It had all the qualities of a normal village, but it was not an effective prison. Now we have everything under control. There is security for the inmates and for us.
When it was known as the Little Village, the prisoners held the real power behind these walls, a place full of drugs, prostitutes, and violence. Director Acevedo is keen to make sure that nothing like this ever happens in La Mesa again, in one of the toughest prisons in the world.